Well, Ann Coulter, one of the biggest selling authors in the U.S., and of course a great columnist, you should have her latest book, Resistance is Futile. Especially you Democrats, read this. You're not following the book. You'd learn what to do. Resistance is futile. And you make sure you follow Ann Coulter on Twitter and Instagram and all that stuff. Ann Coulter, how you doing?
Fantastic. How are you, Mark Simone?
Excellent. Hillary Clinton says what Donald Trump is doing is endangering us all. Is she talking about politicians who put relatives on the payroll of companies?
Right, or demand that a prosecutor stop prosecuting a company that Biden's son is on the board of. No, they've really outdone themselves with this one. I will say, I assume, in fact, I probably said on your program, I thought the Democrats would impeach Trump within a few months of taking the House. So don't be alarmed by that. They have a majority. I don't know why they've wasted so much time. They're all out of their minds. It'll mean nothing. But I do think Americans need to, as I said in my column this week, read the transcript yourself. Because right now it's MSNBC and the New York Times, the Democrats, who are hiding it from you. I mean, you had that little thing yesterday with, I think it was yesterday, with Adam Schiff fantasizing, the conversation he wishes was on that transcript.
Now, Adam Schiff actually said, when he pretended to be reading, he said, I want you to make stuff up about Joe Biden, otherwise you know what's good for you.
Yeah. So that's what they've come to. They're now making up what they wish Trump had done, including, and to be completely honest with you, Mark Simone, I know you and I share the same sick hobby of watching MSNBC.
Oh, I love it.
We haven't watched much cable news at all for the past couple of years. It's just, you lose points of your IQ. There are too many commercials. It's just cheerleading. You learn nothing conservative or liberal. It's just, our team is great, their team sucks. But it hasn't been that helpful. However, I did watch the beginning of a couple of MSNBC shows last night. Rachel Maddow had a whole segment where she fantasized Donald Trump killing the whistleblower and the Attorney General refusing to prosecute. So now we're talking about, as we always do, the dream sequences of liberals. They do not want you to see that transcript because, I think it's funny when Trump says stuff like it was a beautiful conversation. It was perfect. A beautiful conversation. No, it actually is beautiful and it actually is perfect. This nonsense about, the way they phrase it, demanding a favor that would help him with a political opponent and holding up, foreign aid. Well, no, that's exactly what Biden did. But the difference is, in Biden's case, he was trying to do a solid for his son, who was collecting millions of dollars from a Ukrainian company that was under investigation. In Trump's case, he wanted an investigation of the corruption. And by the way, Ukraine was already all over that firing of the prosecutor, all over that company. Trump didn't need to, alert them to what was going on. It started in Ukraine much before this. But anything they say about Trump here, it is the exact same thing that happened under the Obama administration. So even in their worst case fantasy version, MSNBC, Rachel Maddow's dream sequence, they have to say, oh, yeah, well, we did the same thing, but we're good, and Trump is bad. See, that's the difference. That's why we're going to impeach him. Trump bad, Obama and Biden good, which I don't think is much of an argument. I think most Americans, if they're not, foreign policy dorks, are going to say, yeah, we give a lot of foreign aid to other countries. I think we can ask for some favors from them now and then. So that's not a big issue. The other thing I was thinking, they keep playing, they do this a lot. They'll play, things Republicans said during the Clinton impeachment.
Yeah.
I wrote an entire book on the grounds of impeachment. I don't think it had been done before. Going back 200 years, it is a term of art, high crimes and misdemeanors. We got it from England. It has a very specific meaning. It is precise. Now, isn't that curious? I didn't know Trump was going to come along. I thought there were a lot of grounds, and there were, for impeaching Bill Clinton. Have you noticed nobody's quoting that book? You know why? Because they have the grounds for impeachment exactly backwards. They keep saying, Well, with Clinton, it was just personal conduct. Yes, exactly. It's not for policy disputes. That's why the Democrats want to get rid of Trump. They don't like his policies. I mean, most of them are just stated and not actually enacted, but we'll leave that aside for the moment. You can't impeach someone over a policy disagreement. Remember when we created the Constitution, we had just thrown off a king. So we didn't want someone who was above the law. But on the other hand, the framers understood that we need to have one chief executive and all the power for foreign policy, for waging war, for executive branch functions, for administering, the various departments should be in the hands of one man. There were checks, but it's not, we don't like what you just did, we're going to impeach you. So the traditional grounds for impeachment were things like, public drunkenness. It's a character issue. You need a man of good character. And I know liberals will all scream and say Trump doesn't have good character, but we're talking about actual character, not a joke you didn't like.
Well, but he's made a big mistake here. Normally the Republicans will defend him, but the problem is everybody in government, every Republican, Democrat, they've all got relatives on the payrolls of companies. They don't want this brought up. They all got their wife, their cousin, their uncle on the payroll getting a fortune.
That's very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, he kind of stepped on a third rail here that they don't.
Well, I don't, who knows if this influenced him, but man, that Romney has gone bad. Remember.
Bad? He was always bad.
Well, we supported him in, 2000 and then again 2012. Why? Because he wasn't John McCain.
Yeah, so.
It turns out all that time we were supporting him, pedal to the metal, because at least he's not John McCain. He was sitting back fantasizing about being John McCain. That's what he always wanted out of life. But the reason I mentioned Romney just now is not only because he got a fantastic primary opponent last time, he's only from senator. I hope that guy runs again. But also, did you see that one of his top foreign policy aides was also on the board of this company?
Just by coincidence, that's Swamp, boy.
So, yeah, they better be careful about that.
Hey, I just want to say...
Yeah, I assume he'll be impeached. This is... But notice when you hear Democrats talking about it, they will not give you facts. They will give you fantasies. And last night, at least from the beginning of a few episodes I saw, Ari Melber has even lost his mind. He was my last hope for a sane person on MSNBC. He in particular, because he brought on, because he's the only one who would bring on someone to defend Trump and not an ever-Trumper. So I don't know who this guy was. I didn't see the beginning, but I think he was a member of the Trump administration or the campaign or something. And every time he'd answer a question to try to explain, well, no, he wasn't asking for a favor. He was asking to investigate this potential corruption of Biden, demanding, holding on to the check, bragging about holding on to the check, unless the president of Ukraine fired the chief prosecutor who was investigating Hunter Biden's company. That's the investigation that Trump was asking about, actual corruption. Every time he would get close to the word Biden, Ari would cut him off. I think they're all taking, no, you're changing answer the question. I think they're all taking, caffeine pills and they have oxygen tanks and back to make sure Biden's name never comes across NBC airwaves.
Or they do the Chris Cuomo where they jump in. Now, Biden has been totally cleared in this. Hunter Biden has been totally cleared. By who?
Exactly right. Do you think they'd accept that if, Jeff Sessions cleared Trump? Yeah, the Obama administration, but the Ukrainian authorities hadn't cleared the Biden company. Not at all. Also, I'm dying to see the whistleblower. As you know, I think it's going to be Christine Blasey Ford again. It's definitely going to be some hysterical woman, perhaps in the James Comey mode. I think it's very important that the woman, we'll just call the person the woman for now, it wasn't her job to be listening to the president's conversations. The people whose job it was, which I think is kind of weird to begin with, because, again, we have one chief executive, but we'll leave that aside. There are people, and their job for the federal government is listen to the president's phone calls with foreign leaders. Yeah. Make sure they don't say it, or the president doesn't say anything right. They didn't have a problem with this conversation. No, this lunatic who heard about it over pizza, she files the complaint. And we know that her book is going to have the word truth in it. But I'm thinking of starting, we'll have a reward for the person who can guess the exact title to what her book will be someday.
Well, I just want to say I thought it was very touching the way President Obama came out and defended Joe Biden this week. Yeah, there's a dog that didn't bark. Well, everybody get Ann Coulter's book, Resistance is Futile. What's the book on impeachment? High Crimes and Misdemeanors.
High Crimes and Misdemeanors, and I recommend that you read it, and you will see it is shot through with the point that this could not possibly be impeachable behavior. Democrats always want to impeach Republicans because they disagree with the policy. No, that by definition is not impeachable behavior.
Well, get the book. Actually, just go to AnnCoulter.com or get any Ann Coulter's books on Amazon and follow Ann Coulter on Twitter. And Ann Coulter, thanks for being with us.
Good to talk to you, Mark Simone. Bye-bye.
All right, take care.
Trump's phone call with Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky.
Mr. Reagan.
So, Nancy Pelosi has announced on the basis of the content of this phone call that Donald Trump shall be impeached, or that an impeachment inquiry shall begin, or something like that. Okay, so let's have a look at the entire phone call and see precisely what Trump said. After I read this transcript, I would like you to think about this. Does this conversation make a strong foundation for an impeachment inquiry? I will, of course, give you my thoughts afterwards, but you'll need to decide for yourself. All right, now let's read this transcript. Vladimir Zelensky, congratulations on a great victory. We all watched from the United States, and you did a terrific job. The way you came from behind somebody who wasn't given much of a chance, and you ended up winning easily. It's a fantastic achievement. Congratulations. You are absolutely right, Mr. President. We did win big, and we worked hard for this. We worked a lot, but I would like to confess to you that I had an opportunity to learn from you. We used quite a few of your skills and knowledge, and we were able to use it as an example for our elections. And yes, it's true that these were unique elections. We were in a unique situation that we were able to achieve a unique success. The first time, you called me to congratulate me when I won my presidential election. The second time, you're now calling me when my party won the parliamentary election. You know what? I think I should run more often so that you can call me more often, and we can talk on the phone more often. That is a very good idea. I think your country is very happy about that. Well, yeah, to tell you the truth, we're trying to work hard because, you know, we want to drain the swamp here in our country. We brought in many new people, not the old politicians, not the typical politicians, because we want to have a new format and a new type of government. You are a great teacher for us in that. Well, that is very nice of you to say. I will say that we do a lot for Ukraine. We spend a lot of effort, a lot of time, much more than the other European countries are doing, and they should be helping you more than they are. Germany does almost nothing for you guys, all right? All they do is talk, and I think it's something that you should really ask them about. When I was speaking to Angela Merkel, you know, she talks about Ukraine, but she doesn't do anything. A lot of the European countries are the same way, so I think it's something you may want to look at. But the United States has been very, very good to Ukraine. I wouldn't say that it's reciprocal necessarily because, you know, things are happening that are not good, but the United States has been very good to Ukraine. Yeah, you know what? You are absolutely right. Not only 100%, but actually 1,000%. And I can tell you the following. I did talk to Angela Merkel, and I did meet with her, and I also met with and talked with Macron. And I told them that they were not doing quite as much as they needed to be doing on the issues with the sanctions. They're not enforcing the sanctions. They are not working as much as they should for Ukraine. It turns out that even though logically the European Union should be our biggest partner, but technically the United States is a much bigger partner than the European Union. And I'm very grateful to you for that, because the United States is doing quite a lot for Ukraine, much more than the European Union, especially when we're talking about sanctions against the Russian Federation. I would also like to thank you for your great support in the area of defense. We're ready to continue to cooperate for the next steps. Specifically, we are almost ready to buy more javelins from the United States for defense purposes. Yeah. I'd like you to do us a favor, though, because our country has been through a lot, and Ukraine knows a lot about it. I'd like you to find out what happened with this whole situation with Ukraine. They say CrowdStrike. I guess you have one of your wealthy people, the server. They say Ukraine has it. There's a lot of things that went on, the whole situation. I think you are surrounding yourself with some of the same people. I would like to have the Attorney General call you or your people, and I'd like you to get to the bottom of it. As you saw yesterday, that whole nonsense ended with a very poor performance by a man named Robert Mueller, an incompetent performance. But they say a lot of it started with Ukraine. Whatever you can do, it's very important that you do it, if that's possible. Yes, it is very important for me. And everything that you just mentioned earlier, for me as a president, it's very important that we are open for any future cooperation. We're ready to open a whole new page on cooperation in relations between the United States and Ukraine. For that purpose, I just called our ambassador from the United States, and he will be replaced by a very competent and very experienced ambassador who will work hard on making sure that our two nations are getting closer. I would also like and hope to see him having your trust and your confidence and having personal relations with you so that you can cooperate even more so. I will personally tell you that one of my assistants spoke with Mr. Giuliani just recently, and we are hoping very much that Mr. Giuliani will be able to travel to Ukraine, and we will meet once he comes to Ukraine. I just want to assure you once again that you have nobody but friends around us. I will make sure that I surround myself with the best, most experienced people. I also want to tell you that we're friends. We are great friends. You, Mr. President, have friends in our country, so we can continue our strategic partnership. I also plan to surround myself with great people, and in addition to that investigation, I guarantee, as the president of Ukraine, that all the investigations will be done openly and candidly. That I can assure you. Good, because I heard that you had a prosecutor who was very good, and he was shut down, and that, that's really unfair. A lot of people are talking about that, the way they shut your very good prosecutor down, and you had some very bad people involved. Mr. Giuliani is a highly respected man. He was the mayor of New York City, great mayor, and I would like him to call you. I will ask him to call you along with the Attorney General. Rudy very much knows what's happening, and he's a very capable guy. If you could speak with him, that would be great. The former ambassador of the United States, the woman, she was bad news, and the people she was dealing with in the Ukraine were bad news. So I just wanted to let you know that. The other thing, there's a lot of talk about Biden's son, that Biden stopped the prosecution, and a lot of people want to find out about that. So whatever you can do with the Attorney General, that would be great. Biden went around bragging that he'd stopped the prosecution, so if you can look into it, it sounds horrible to me. Yeah, I wanted to tell you about the prosecutor. First of all, I understand and I'm knowledgeable about the situation. Since we have won the absolute majority in our parliament, the next prosecutor general will be 100% my person, my candidate, who will be approved by the parliament and will start as a new prosecutor in September. He or she will look into the situation specifically to the company that you mentioned in this issue. This issue of the investigation of the case is actually an issue of making sure to restore honesty. So we'll take care of that, and we'll work on the investigation of that case. On top of that, I would kindly ask you if you have any additional information that you could provide to us. That would be very helpful for the investigation to make sure that we administer justice in our country. With regard to the ambassador to the United States from Ukraine, as far as I recall, her name was Ivanovich. That was great. You were the first one who told me that she was a bad ambassador, because I agree with you 100%. Her attitude toward me was far from the best. She admired the previous president. She was on his side. She just wouldn't accept me as the new president, or at least not well enough. Well, she's going through some things. I'm going to have Mr. Giuliani give you a call, and I'm also going to have the Attorney General Barr call you, and we will get to the bottom of it. Look, I'm sure you'll figure it out. I heard the prosecutor was treated very badly, and he was a very fair prosecutor, so good luck with everything. You know, your economy is going to get better and better, I predict, and you'll have a lot of assets. It's a great country. I have many Ukrainian friends. They are incredible people. You know, I'd like to tell you, I also have quite a few Ukrainian friends that live in the United States. And actually, last time I traveled to the United States, I stayed in New York near Central Park. And I stayed at Trump Tower. I will, of course, talk to them, and I hope to see them in the future. I also wanted to thank you for your invitation to visit the United States, specifically Washington, D.C. I also want to ensure you that we're going to be very serious about the case, and we will work on this investigation. As to the economy, there is much potential for our two countries, and one of the things that's very important for Ukraine is energy independence. I believe that can be very successful, and cooperating on energy independence with the United States, we're already working on cooperation. We're buying American oil. But I am very hopeful for a future meeting. We'll have more time and more opportunities to discuss these opportunities and to get to know each other better. And I'd like to thank you very, very much for your support. Good. Well, thank you very much, and I appreciate that. I'll tell Rudy, the Attorney General Barr, to call. Thank you. Whenever you'd like to come to the White House, feel free to call. Give us a date, and we'll work it out. I look forward to seeing you again. Thank you very much. I would be very happy to come, and would be happy to meet with you personally and get to know you better. I'm looking forward to our meeting. And also, I'd like to invite you to visit Ukraine and come to the city of Kiev, which is a beautiful city. We have a beautiful country which would welcome you. On the other hand, I believe that on September 1st, we're going to be in Poland. We can meet in Poland, hopefully. And after that, it might be a good idea for you to travel to Ukraine. We can either take my plane and go to Ukraine, or we can take your plane, which is probably much better than mine. Okay, you know what? We can work that out. I look forward to seeing you in Washington and maybe in Poland, because I think we're going to be there at that time. So thank you very much, Mr. President. Congratulations on the fantastic job that you've done. The whole world was watching. I'm not sure it was so much of an upset, but congratulations. All right, thank you, Mr. President. Bye-bye. End of conversation. Okay, so let's break this down. It seems to me like the biggest favor that Trump asked from Zelensky was to investigate election interference. He talks about CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike is a company that tied the hacking of the DNC servers to Russia, so Trump is trying to investigate that. You're going to see a lot on CNN and some of the other left-wing news organizations that Trump specifically asks for a favor, and somehow that's supposedly some kind of proof that Trump is acting corrupt or something. I'm not really sure why using the word favor suddenly makes it nefarious or something like that. But another thing you have to realize is, even if asking for a favor is somehow indicative of corruption, which I don't believe in any way that it is, but okay, even if it were, he didn't ask for a favor about the Biden situation. He asked specifically for a favor about international election interference. So when they say on CNN, when they write in the little thing or whatever, they talk about it and they say, Trump was asking for a favor, Trump was asking for a favor, it's not relevant to the Biden situation at all. They're conflating two separate parts of the phone call that have nothing to do with each other at all. So why is he asking about this CrowdStrike thing, about this information about the DNC servers and all this kind of stuff? Well, some have speculated that Ukraine was involved in the hacking of these DNC servers or whatever. Okay, so it makes sense to ask... Okay, so if Trump thinks that might be true, it makes sense to ask Ukraine about it. The left-wing media is calling this a conspiracy theory for some reason. You know what? They really have to stop using that term. They become addicted to it. They call everything that they disagree with, or maybe they don't know enough about, a conspiracy theory. But whatever, the mainstream media are morons. The truth is that this conversation is actually exculpatory with regard to Russian collusion. If Trump's guilty of collusion, why is he still investigating this stuff? Also, the left keeps criticizing Trump for not combating international election interference. This is actually clear evidence that he is doing exactly that. But is Trump threatening to withhold financial aid to Ukraine if they don't cooperate with the election interference investigation? I mean, that's what it sounds like. And OMG, Zelensky said he stayed at the Trump Tower in New York. Emoluments clause, emoluments clause. Clearly, Trump is being bribed. Zelensky's obviously illegally influencing Trump here. And what did Zelensky say about buying American oil? Was that a threat? Trump doesn't do exactly what Zelensky asks. He's threatening to stop staying at Trump hotels and buying American oil. And then Trump invites him to the White House. Was that a bribe? Trump is bribing foreign leaders? You know what? That's it. That is it. AOC, get him. All right, enough silliness. All right, look, no, there is nothing corrupt here. This was a great conversation. It was a bit saccharine. I mean, it was, did you hear how sweet and beautiful and charming and delightful? And it was lovely. I think the only scandal here is that Trump and Zelensky are clearly in love. I mean, who's going to tell Melania? But seriously, this is what world leaders are supposed to do. Talking about your positive relationship and talking about what you need from each other. This is simply good diplomacy. Look, we need election interference investigated. We need this Biden thing investigated. If we don't ask countries to help us with issues that are related to those countries, we're severely limiting ourselves. That's what international diplomacy is all about. So why is the left going so crazy about this? I mean, obviously they hate Trump, but how can they justify it when clearly there was nothing sinister about this phone call? Allow me to play for you Don Lemon's interpretation of this phone call that Trump had with Zelensky. This is how Don Lemon reimagines this call, and I think this will illustrate exactly what the left is thinking here.
Imagine this, a meeting between two people who want to do business together, okay? Two folks who want to do business together. One of them is a lot more powerful than the other one. The powerful one says, you know, we do a lot for you, but it hasn't been reciprocal. Things are happening that are not good, but you've been really good. We've been really good to you. I would like you to do us a favor, though. I would like you to investigate something. Let's call it, say, CrowdStrike. I'm going to have one of my top department heads call you about it so you can get to the bottom of it. It's important you do that, if that's possible. The reply from the less powerful person, yes, it is. Important to me, too. The powerful person says, good, because I heard you had this other problem. It's about new business, a new business rival, my main new business rival, and his son. Look into it. It sounds horrible to me. Now, the other person, who at this point has got to see where all of this is going, says, oh, yes, we will take care of that, and we will work on the investigation. Please provide us any additional information that you can. And then the powerful person says, I'll have my personal representative and my top department head call. We will get to the bottom of it. I'm sure you will figure it out. Good luck with everything. Your economy is going to get better and better, I predict. That is the essence of what happened in this call.
Don Lemon's interpretation of this phone call is like a mashup, right? It's a mashup between the call and the movie The Godfather. And this is why the left keeps digging themselves into these holes. They keep imagining all of these things that aren't happening.
This is the essence of what the president communicates. We've been very good to your country, very good. No other country has done as much as we have. But you know what? I don't see much reciprocity here. I hear what you want. I have a favor I want from you, though. And I'm going to say this only 7 times, so you better listen good. I want you to make up dirt on my political opponent, understand lots of it. On this and on that, you know what I'm asking, and so I'm only going to say this a few more times, in a few more ways. And by the way, don't call me again. I'll call you when you've done what I asked. This is, in character, what the president was trying to communicate.
Dancing and prancing around in crazy land. Again, reminding a country of a positive relationship and in the same call indicating what you need from them. These are just sensible conversation points. They're not necessarily related. Naturally, if a country refuses to ever cooperate with an allied country, their positive relationship will deteriorate. So there is that, I suppose, natural threat. But that's going to be true whether Trump wants it to be true or not. Trump isn't manufacturing this consequence, and he certainly isn't leveraging it. Biden, however, did manufacture a consequence during his negotiation. He admits to having done it. The way the left sees it, the difference between the Biden scandal and the Trump scandal is motivation. Was Biden motivated by a passion against corruption or orders from the administration or pressure from the international community, or did he do it to protect his son? I don't know the answer to that, but the fact that there is a clear conflict of interest here raises the possibility that it was done to protect his son. Investigating that is not unreasonable. Then there is the question of Trump's motivation. Was his motivation to take out a political opponent, or was it justice? In Trump's case, it doesn't actually matter because there is clear evidence to suggest that Biden may well have committed a crime. What he did was incredibly suspicious. Trump has a responsibility to investigate that. It would be irresponsible for Trump to dismiss it. If Biden is the kind of guy, and we know from China that he is, if he's the type of guy to leverage his office for personal gain, we as voters should know that. Of course, the left is convinced that Trump is doing this because Biden is his political adversary, but they just dismiss the possibility that Biden might be guilty. The left suddenly seems to think that any criminal investigation into a presidential candidate is somehow corrupt, even though they just did this to Trump for like 3 years. Suddenly, this is an abuse of power. Where were you guys when Hillary and Obama and the FBI were doing this to Trump? Now suddenly you're sensitive to this stuff? And there was no real evidence against Trump. The evidence was manufactured. But there is evidence against Biden, his own admission. If you admit to a crime, you need to be investigated for that crime. Biden running for president does not give him immunity to the law. Running for president is not a get-out-of-jail-free card. Biden said that he convinced the Obama administration to give Ukraine $1 billion, which he was then responsible for handing over. But instead of handing it over, he leveraged that $1 billion to get a prosecutor general who was investigating his son fired. Pay attention to what I just said. He was the one, Biden was the one that convinced the Obama administration to give Ukraine the money in the first place. He then leveraged that money for his own personal gain. Let me play the clip so I can show you.
I remember going over convincing our team, or others, to convincing us that we should be providing for loan guarantees. And I went over, for, I guess, the 12th, 13th time to Kyiv, and I was supposed to announce that there was another $1 billion loan guarantee. And I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and from Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. So they said they were walking out to press conference. I said, no, I said, we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a bitch. Got fired. I remember going over convincing our team, or others, to convincing us that we should be providing for loan guarantees. I remember going over convincing our team, or others, to convincing us that we should be providing for loan guarantees. I remember going over convincing our team, or others, to convincing us that we should be providing for loan guarantees.
You see, he says that he orchestrated the entire thing. To just dismiss this as Biden having a great heart is ridiculous. And you know what's even crazier about all of this? Biden isn't even the Democrat nominee. There are other candidates still. And even if Biden becomes the nominee, he can't beat Trump anyway. Nobody is afraid of Biden. Okay, nobody on the right, I'm not afraid of Biden. Trump isn't afraid of Biden. Nobody on the right believes that if Joe Biden gets the nomination, he's going to beat Trump. None of us are afraid of that. Okay, so to think, oh, we got to take out Biden because he's so dangerous. We don't think like that, okay? That's how you guys think. That's how the left thinks, okay? The left is always like, oh, Trump is somehow unbeatable. We've got to take him out somehow. We've got to impeach him. We've got to find some kind of legal way that we can get him out because we're never going to get him out through an election. We don't think that way. We don't think like, oh, you know, we got to take out Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders. We don't care about these people because they are not a threat to us, okay? And this whole case against Biden that Trump brought up, this is not just some unsubstantiated rumor. Biden said this, okay? The only reason we know about it is because he bragged about it. I would actually be with the left-wing media here if I thought Trump was being shady. But two things would have to be very different. One, if Biden was the actual nominee, okay? But he's not. He's just a guy running for president. There's lots of people running for president, okay? If they commit crimes, we still have to investigate them. Running for president doesn't give you instant immunity to the law. Second thing, if his Ukraine extortion deal was just some unlikely rumor or something, right? So if both of those things were true, right? So if Biden was the actual nominee and he was head-to-head with Trump, and if this Ukraine thing was just some kind of a rumor that was unsubstantiated, probably a lie, but, whatever. If Trump was then, aggressively looking into this, to me it would seem like, yeah, well, he's just trying to take out Biden. But first of all, Biden is not the nominee. He's just a guy running for president. And secondly, he probably is guilty of this crime. I mean, it seems pretty darn suspicious. And thirdly, Trump is pretty passive in suggesting that the president look into this. He wasn't, I didn't, when I was reading that transcript, it didn't seem like there was a lot of pressure there. There certainly wasn't any kind of quid pro quo. There wasn't any kind of threat. I mean, it was just, oh, hey, yeah, there's this thing that happened that people want to know about. Can you look into it? The way that the left distorts this whole phone call is mental. But you know what? Biden can't beat Trump in 2020, and the left knows that. In fact, the entirety of the 2020 Democrats running for president, they are all a joke. And this is why they're trying to impeach Trump. They can't beat him in a fair election, and so they're trying to oust him via impeachment. And they claim that Trump is a danger to democracy. Yeah. So that's the transcript. Does this conversation make a strong foundation for an impeachment inquiry? You have my opinion, but you'll have to decide for yourself. And remember, it's not that our liberal friends are ignorant. It's just that they know so much. That isn't so. Good night. All right. I'd like to meet Zelensky. He's such a cool dude.
You know, someone very profoundly once said many years ago that if fascism ever comes to America, it'll come in the name of liberalism. Fascism is private ownership, but total government control and regulation. Well, isn't this the liberal philosophy? The conservative, so-called, is the one that says, less government, get off my back, get out of my pocket, let me have more control of my own destiny.
Donald Trump, Joe Biden, who is corrupt?
Mr. Reagan.
So I'm watching CNN this morning because I have to, for you. Anyway, I'm watching CNN, and they're talking about the whistleblower thing, right? Everybody's speculating on what this whistleblower's concern was, right? The general consensus within the media is that during a phone call with the president of Ukraine, Donald Trump asked the president to investigate Joe Biden's dealings with that country. Specifically, there was an incident during the Obama administration when Joe Biden was vice president. Apparently, Joe Biden interfered with, I believe it was $8 billion in humanitarian aid. I think it was humanitarian aid. I'm not exactly sure what the money was supposed to be for, but there was $8 billion that was supposed to go to Ukraine from the United States government. I don't really know why we're giving Ukraine $8 billion, but anyway, that was apparently a thing. Joe Biden interjected himself into this deal, and he said, if you do not fire a particular prosecutor, a very specific person that was working in the government, if you don't fire him, we're not going to give you this $8 billion in aid, right? I mean, that's a fairly hostile negotiating tactic. I mean, that's pretty hardcore. He must have really wanted this prosecutor out of his office in the Ukraine.
I remember going over convincing our team, or others too, convincing us that we should be providing for loan guarantees. And I went over, I guess, the 12th, 13th time to Kyiv, and I was supposed to announce that there was another $1 billion loan guarantee. And I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and from Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. So they said they were walking out to press conference. I said, no, I said, I'm not going to, or we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a bitch. Got fired.
Why Joe Biden was so obsessed with this one official in the Ukrainian government we can only speculate. But it just so happens that Joe Biden's son was being investigated by that very prosecutor in Ukraine at that time. Now, that seems awfully suspicious. All right, we're back. Now, let me talk to you a little bit more about Joe Biden. So now the speculation right now is that Donald Trump's phone call to this Ukrainian president, who, by the way, the new Ukrainian president is like an awesome guy, right? He was a former television comedian who was so tired of the corruption in Ukraine that he ran for president himself and won.
Volodymyr Zelensky, the comedian candidate joking at the ballot box, asking if he can cast more than one vote for the camera. Zelensky comes to the candidacy by way of a hit TV show called Servant of the People, where he plays an outsider elevated to the presidency.
And everybody in Ukraine right now is just loving this new Ukrainian president because he's such a cool guy, and he's really like a politician of the people. He seems to be genuinely trying to make the country better for the people of Ukraine and kind of get rid of some of this corruption. In fact, let's show a clip of this Ukrainian president from his days in comedy. So this is the guy. This is the guy that's the president of Ukraine. Cool guy. So when Trump is talking to this guy, to this Ukrainian president, I actually don't think it's completely unreasonable that Trump would say, hey, look, Joe Biden apparently committed a crime or did something a little bit shady here during his time as vice president. Can you look into it? I think it's perfectly reasonable to, if you suspect that an American citizen committed a crime or did something that is very suspicious, to ask somebody to look into it who has maybe better resources to investigate that than you do. Now, since this shady business happened with Ukraine or within the country of Ukraine, it's perfectly reasonable for Trump to ask assistance from Ukraine to help him investigate this particular issue. I mean, we do this all the time with different countries, right? If we feel like some murderer, for instance, goes to another country, we have something called an extradition law, right? So we won't send in our military to go get him, right, or our police to go get him. We'll ask the country to arrest him and send the murderer back to us, right? So we ask for cooperation with other governments all the time in dealing with crimes. I don't see how this is any different. But this is why I decided to make the video, because whilst watching CNN, the CNN reporter kept characterizing this whole situation as a debunked conspiracy theory. Okay, so I'm not really sure why he refers to it as a conspiracy theory or why he thinks it's debunked, but then he had a fact checker come on, so that he could interview this guy. And the fact checker went ahead and just corroborated everything that Fox News and all the conservative media outlets have been saying about this. He said that, in fact, yes, Joe Biden's son did work within Ukraine, and he was being investigated by this prosecutor, and Joe Biden did withhold this $8 billion in aid, demanding that this prosecutor be fired before Ukraine got the aid, right? And once the prosecutor was fired, the investigation into his son's activities or the business that his son was dealing with, that investigation went away.
President Trump is again insisting today that reporters should dig into a conspiracy theory involving Biden, Ukraine, and a Ukrainian prosecutor. What's the story and the facts as we know them?
Sure. So what we know for sure is that in 2016, Joe Biden, then the vice president, pushed Ukrainian leaders to get rid of a senior prosecutor. The Ukrainians eventually agreed after Biden threatened them to withhold $1 billion in U.S. loan guarantees, and the parliament overwhelmingly voted to get rid of the prosecutor. Now, the reason there are some questions about this is that at the same time as Biden was making this push to oust the prosecutor, his son Hunter Biden was sitting on the board of directors of a Ukrainian natural gas company owned by someone who is theoretically under investigation by the prosecutor.
So he acknowledges, this fact checker comes on CNN, acknowledges all these things, but then the reason why they say this is a debunked conspiracy theory is because they refute the presumption that Joe Biden did this because of the investigation that was pending against his son. Their contention, which is what Joe Biden's contention is, their contention is that Joe Biden did this on principle because he thought that that particular prosecutor was corrupt. Maybe that's true. Maybe that's true. But you don't know that that's true, CNN. There's clear motivation here for him to have done this simply to protect his son. Even though that motivation is obvious, you're going to just dismiss that because you think Joe Biden is a good person and you think Trump is a bad person. So Joe Biden must be telling the truth and Trump and all the conservatives must just be, evil and horrible and they're just trying to get Joe Biden. I mean, it's insanity. The level of hypocrisy is maddening. Okay, so Donald Trump, no matter what he does, no matter how obvious it is that he's innocent of any charge that you level against him, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how innocent he is, you're going to assume that Trump is guilty. On the other hand, it doesn't matter how clear the evidence is against any Democrat, they're innocent because they're a good person. They're on the left. The degree to which CNN is able to indulge their bias is actually quite shocking. I mean, despite the fact that I think that CNN lost its credibility a long time ago, I'm always still astonished by how willing they are to indulge their biases, and not in like a little way, full on indulge their biases, like extremely so, right? Like castigate the president for things that he didn't do, total speculation, stuff they have no evidence on, and completely exonerate somebody like Joe Biden for something about which there is an obvious motive, and he's actually talked about what he did. This is not a conspiracy theory. Joe Biden has talked about having withheld that money in order to get that prosecutor fired. He's talked about this. He's admitted to it. So this is not a conspiracy theory. This is what happened. And look, maybe CNN is right. Maybe this guy was a corrupt political figure. An investigation into the events around what happened there with that $8 billion in aid, the investigation that Trump is suspected to be trying to conduct here, that investigation, that will only be discovered by such an investigation. And so the left shouldn't have really a problem with this. But they're saying things like, oh, this is an abuse of power. This is clear evidence of Donald Trump's corruption.
Trump deserves to be investigated. And he's using the abuse of power and every element of the presidency to try to do something to smear me.
Let me ask you a question, left, CNN, MSNBC, you guys. If Donald Trump were, say, running for office and one of his political opponents tried to investigate him for a crime, right? Would that be an abuse of power? Would that be an abuse of power? Because you guys were totally doing that throughout his candidacy. Now suddenly that Trump is like, oh, we should investigate Joe Biden for this crime. Oh my, this is an abuse of power. This is just all political. Now, what if Joe Biden really did commit this crime? What if Joe Biden committed a worse crime? What if Joe Biden committed murder? Is Donald Trump not allowed to request an investigation about a murder? I mean, what crimes are off limits here? At what point does it stop becoming an abuse of power and start becoming reasonable for Donald Trump to inquire about potential criminal activity about an American citizen? Okay, if Joe Biden really did commit a crime here, or he did something that was untoward for his position, in his position as a vice president, I think that we have a right to know about that as American citizens. I mean, are all candidates for president now immune to jurisprudence? All right, let me back up for a second. The reason that the left thinks this is so terrible that maybe Trump asked the Ukrainian president to investigate the Biden situation, which I don't know if that's actually what the whistleblower said happened, but that's what everybody thinks happened. So the reason they think this is a problem is because they suspect that this would be considered like an abuse of power. Right? So in a dictatorship, for instance, if you have an opposing political view, it's fairly common for the dictator to have you executed, right? Or have you imprisoned or silenced in some way. Sometimes these prosecutions of political dissidents or political enemies is based on a sham accusation, right? So they are framed for something, they're accused of something that they clearly didn't do, or there's some obscure law that's used to arrest them, and they're imprisoned or they're executed, and really they didn't do anything wrong. They just had a differing political view, or they challenged the dictator. This is known to have happened in the USSR. This is known to have happened in a lot of communist countries, third world dictatorships, Africa, these kinds of places. So we tend to associate this kind of abuse of power, where you would say, use your position as president to oppress a political opponent. We consider this to be horrifically unethical. Not just unethical, but something that is extremely dangerous to the freedom of Western-style democracy. So that's what they're basically trying to say. They're basically trying to say that Donald Trump is using his position as president to oppress a political opponent. But here's the thing. Investigating a political opponent isn't actually corruption if the political opponent actually did the crime that you're investigating him for, okay? And it looks like what Joe Biden did was, in fact, as sinister as we on the right suspect that it was. Now, again, maybe it wasn't, but there was a clear motivation for such an action, and such an action was taken. Now, I'm sure we give aid to hundreds of countries around the world all the time who have various corrupt officials within the government. I don't know of any other instance. I've never heard in the news ever of another instance in which anyone in political office, a president, a vice president, an ambassador, I've never heard of any kind of an official ever presenting another country with an ultimatum like this. You fire a specific person within your government, or we're not going to give you financial aid. When has that ever happened? I'd love for them to look into the history of this. Anybody to look into the history of this. One of the people who watch my channel, maybe. You guys are excellent at doing this sort of research. Dick Jackman, get on that, right? How many times has this happened in the history of the country where we have withheld aid because a country didn't fire an official that we felt was corrupt? I don't think that's ever happened ever. And it just so happens that this particular prosecutor, this prosecutor in Ukraine, just happened to be investigating Joe Biden's son. And Joe Biden levies this very specific ultimatum. We will not give you your $8 billion in financial aid unless you fire this specific guy who's investigating my son. Oh, no, there's no possible way that was Joe Biden protecting his son. No. This is the most ridiculous supposition that CNN or MSNBC could possibly have about this particular incident. But they have this supposition because they like Joe Biden and they hate Donald Trump, and they want to make their viewers believe that Donald Trump is corrupt and Joe Biden is a pure good person. I mean, it's just another way for them to attack Trump. Now, Joe Biden's come out and said, oh, Trump's so corrupt. But I think behind the scenes, Joe Biden is terrified right now. If what he did was corrupt, and we figure that out, and that all becomes discovered, I think he's pretty much screwed. Because not only do I think that the American public would probably, hopefully not vote him, give him the nomination, for the Democrats, but I think it could possibly lead to him going to jail. I think he could potentially go to prison for that. I suspect. Now, I'm not a lawyer. I don't actually know the details of that kind of abuse of power, because that really is an abuse of power if that's exactly what Joe Biden did, which is what it sounds like. Anyway, so I just wanted to give you my 2 cents on this and really clarify what I think's been going on here, clarify my thoughts about why I think the left is completely wrong on this and acting, I think, super desperate and super crazy about this specific situation. I know I've been a little bit sparse with my videos lately, but I have a big thing coming up, I think probably at the end of next month. So hopefully I can get that out. I've been working hard on that. So my channel's going to get a lot better real soon. That's it for me. Thanks for watching. And remember, it's not that our liberal friends are ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so. Good night.